Greetings. This is Mr. Nobody here with the next in my series of what I call the MAGA Republican. And I can only apologize for not having had the hat on in my previous installments. Just didn't think of it. But it's time to make it obvious here. Well, subject for today's is going to be the MAGA Republican and the Patriotic Militias. This is really the ultimate goal, right there in the Constitution, that that the right to bear arms is all about. An armed populace isn't merely so people can go, hunting, along with fishing or whatever, or even necessarily that somebody can just protect themselves, their own house or whatever from intruders, although they can have those uses too. But here's the other thing: an armed populace is impossible to conquer. It's one of the reasons why nobody ever conquers Switzerland, even though it's right there in the middle. You had World War I and II raging all the way around Switzerland, and Switzerland just sits there calmly, safely, neutral, barely bothered by much of anything, because every person there, or at least every guy, I don't know if they would have trained girls in this or not, or maybe some if they wanted, I'm not sure the deal, was trained in how to shoot, how to do everything else. And they had this notion that, okay, let's say you've got 10,000 people in a city and they throw 20,000 soldiers at you, and you go out there, you take down 2 of those soldiers and go home, and everybody else does the same. I mean, that's Switzerland, and that's why they can stay neutral in so many other parts of the other countries there of Europe have more difficulty, especially right there in the middle of the action. You got Germany right over here, and Austria over here, and Italy over here, and France over here. I mean, all these countries that are all very, very much affected, or affecting, as the case may be, in the war by affecting others in significant ways. And then there's little Switzerland, like the eye of the storm, all peaceful and calm, while the hurricane of World War II rages all the way around it. So it was part of how they did that. And weapons, this is why the Second Amendment of the Constitution is so important. There's another policy that comes all the way back from the Declaration of Independence, something along the lines, I wish I had the exact quote in front of me, but it's something along the lines of, if the government does not serve the needs of the people have the right to replace that government with another. Now, that's a pretty extreme step. We hope things never come to such a pass. And certainly, as much as humanly possible, we want to work within the system. I mean, that was part of the genius of the American Constitution. Hopefully I'll have another section where I can dwell into that in more detail. It really is a genius, and it really is something that whatever else happens, we are about that. We need to keep that going. But meanwhile, you've got all these people who are good with guns. They go out in the woods. Maybe they use paint guns for their target practice. If you're going to use a human target, you of course would want to use a paint gun and not of course not. And so you have all these people who are very good at that, and they're always saying, "Oh, they're extreme and right wing," and yeah, but let me tell you something about it. The people got the political spectrum all wrong. They think of right as being the opposite of left. Well, maybe once upon a time that may have made sense, but we're now in a different time where the opposite of right now is simply wrong, and that's it. So the only basically, the more to the right you are, the more right you are. And if you're all the way to the right, then you're as right as humanly possible, right as rain. So that's how it really goes. And so what is it to be extreme right wing? To support this, to be ready to, if necessary, put your life on the line, fighting, if need be, with whatever weapons are at your control, to protect our basic constitutional rights. We don't want to overthrow a government, but if they want to try to overthrow us, we can, if nothing else, lay down a perimeter and just say, beyond this, you shall not pass. That we can always do. That we should have done in various times and places, and we can do. Now, I know lately there's a few things that have gone wrong. There's another subject. I'm not going to delve into this now, but in a future sub-series, I do want to talk about this. Is that we, unfortunately, it has happened on occasion where where at least some of the groups of patriotic militias have been kind of led around by the nose into stuff that you kind of look back and say they really should have known better. They really should have. But one also realizes that the presence of these patriotic militias, and another problem really solve each other very beautifully. We all hear about how the police have been defunded everywhere and they just don't have the resources. And oh, by the way, there's a lot more going on than just that the police don't have all the money to hire the people they need or to have the equipment they need and so on and so forth. But there's another thing too, is that there's a lot of ways that their hands are being tied by laws that have been calculated to make their life as difficult as possible. Now you think, well, do you want to make it easy for them? I mean, okay, an individual police officer could be corrupt, and probably something needs to be done about that kind of situation. But I think a lot of times they get that way because they've got one of those thankless jobs, and they have to try to do all this, all the while navigating through this complex series of rules and laws and this and that just make it impossible. I mean, perhaps some of us who were around for a few years remember the Ruby Ridge stakeout, where they sat around this compound, the wacko whatever people, maybe that's a different one, but the same kind of thing where it's like they're trying to lay siege to it, and they surrounded it for months, afraid to go in because they didn't want to, and this was our military, our police, our normal, conventional, law enforcement. You see? And now all of a sudden they're a whole lot more undermanned and so forth. There's a perfectly reasonable and straightforward way to make these two aspects of society work together. It's very simple. Police forces, and especially those that are appointed by the local, city or county governments, because you can get state or federal types, and that's kind of a different thing. They're kind of outsiders, but the locals, they know the locals, they know the people they're protecting, they know them on a first name basis, maybe even. And these are the people who are the most shorthanded of all. But they can fix that very easily. And this is what it is. All they need to do is to deputize the patriotic militias, whatever are operative. There it is. Just deputize them. Now, you don't just say, okay, we grant you authority to work. When you deputize somebody, you also have terms of that. You tell them, okay, we're going to guide you here and there. We're going to tell you what we want you to do, what we don't want you to do, what you can do, what you can't do. And that way, you see, and we could instruct them in as much detail as it takes to get it right. And anybody that again goes out of control, like a bad cop could go out of control, would just have to be not only undeputized, but could be suitably penalized because he's doing the wrong stuff. But most people in these things, they take time and effort out of their own normal lives and busy schedules to do this stuff, which could at some point be the last line of defense for America gone totalitarian. And there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of folks out there who really want a totalitarian America, you see. And then here we are, these humble little Republicans, MAGA, and even most of those who aren't, who want a constitutional republic. We want to have rules that we follow, protocols that try to make justice as much as humanly possible. So that's what we need to do. So just having the two forces, the conventional police, especially the local ones, most of all, and the local patriotic militias, working together, you see, guiding them into what needs to be done. And all of a sudden, you just enlarge the size of your police force. And these are people who know what to do and how to do it. And they're not going to just go irresponsibly blowing people away or whatever. You can instruct them, exactly when, where, and how. And, as much as possible, try to find other uses of whatever weapons they're carrying. And it need not always be a gun. It could be a taser. It could be other things. Or just something where you're a marksman. You don't need to put it through the heart. Put it through a hand or a foot or something, or a knee. And it's just slow them up, slow them down. You don't really want to kill people if you can avoid that. You just want to stop them from trying to destroy us. Because it is the nature of what we call a just war. And there's a lot of, it's a standard, let's just say ethical, moral teaching of what's called the just war. To defend yourself, your family, friends, neighbors, community against unjust, unprovoked attacks. You see, you could do what is necessary to defend yourself. You don't want to go beyond that, absolutely not. But you do enough to see to it that they cannot harm you. So, somebody's in your house and the burglar, you want to be able to keep them from either running away or doing you any harm, or doing your property any harm, or any more harm since they've broken in already. And so you try to immobilize them. That's the goal. You want to stop them from doing any more harm. And that really, right there in a nutshell, is it. I have this. I think of those guys in Louisiana, the McCloskeys, I think. They were actually Democrats, interestingly enough, but they have guns. And the Antifa people were coming into their part of town, and they just made it clear, you're not welcome here. And I'm thinking, if I was like that, I would like to put some bullets in my front lawn and just make it clear. You want to stand on the sidewalk and air your grievances, I will listen patiently and with as much understanding as I can. But I'm taking out the gophers in my lawn here, and if some stray bullet accidentally goes through you, have nobody to blame but yourself. So just stay on the sidewalk and you'll be safe. Now, what are your grievances? And if they really have any legitimate grievances, most of them just wanted a chance to do a lot of mayhem and get away with it. Did you notice this? Now, back in the 1960s, there were lots of protests. The interesting thing was, when there were protests in the 1960s, reporters could just collar any random demonstrator and say, what is this about? Why are you demonstrating? And the person would give some kind of intelligent response. We're protesting the fact that this happens and that happens, and this is wrong, and this needs to change. And you could ask, well, what do you think should be done? And they'll probably even have an intelligent, well, at least suggestion. Some idea that you should make you go back and say, wow, this is something we simply really should do. It's reasonable, it's practical, it will solve this problem that you're protesting, because it was from a position of strength and intelligence. But now, you notice they never interviewed any of the rioters of the last couple of years. You know why? Because they don't have anything to say. They don't. You put one of those and say, here, what are you protesting? And then you just kind of, they have nothing to say. They don't know what they're doing. They just like going around causing mayhem because they know they can. So they never got interviewed. You never got to hear them. So I think that's a rather interesting contrast. And here, if they had anything to say, we had a press that really wanted to, call it a nice peaceful protest when they're blowing up buildings and setting fire to stuff, and even injuring police officers and others with lasers in their eyes and stones and bricks and things like that. This is just a peaceful little protest. No, standing in the street, marching around, shouting slogans and holding a sign is a peaceful protest. That's our freedom of speech. destroying stuff for no reason, that is not free speech. That's just plain old destruction. That's just arson or vandalism, or in some cases, injury, assault and battery, and occasionally even murder. And they all say the names of this person and that person. Well, how about saying the names of all these police officers that have been injured or killed in these things? Just trying to protect the city from further destruction. Say those names, will you? Anyway, we need our patriotic militias. They're the last line of defense. And, okay, let me just, as a quick thing, bring out one last tidbit. And I say, well, but didn't they go into the Capitol on January 6th? Well, this shows why it's a good idea that they be deputized by the police. Because, unfortunately, they can be misled sometimes. Obviously, they were. And I tell you, they were misled. But that's another story for another installment. So that's why it's good that they can be deputized by people who will control, contain, and direct and focus their activities to what's really needed. Well, that's my take on patriotic militias. My only regret is I once bought a gun to do some target practice, and the only thing I found is I can't hit the broadside of a barn. But there's a lot of good folks out there who can. And I'd be willing to support them if it comes to that. So that's what I have to say for them. Thanks for listening.